Good deeds done in the wrong civilization look like nothing in other people's eyes. I built that flood barrier myself, pouring sweat into every stone, believing I was protecting more than just my house. I was doing what was right for everyone on this street. But to her, it wasn't about safety or legacy. It was a scar on her precious landscape, and in her hands, the rules were weapons, not guidelines. So yeah, I got slapped with a $10,000 fine by the HOA, a demolition order, and a healthy dose of public shaming for good measure. I did what they demanded. And when the storms finally came, the water did what water does, swept through, hungry and unstoppable, and the first thing it swallowed up. Victoria's gleaming, overpriced HOA headquarters. Sometimes justice doesn't wait for a courtroom. Sometimes it just shows up, wild and muddy and absolutely indifferent to property values. The first time Victoria Langford strutted onto my property, clipboard in hand, I was down by the old stone wall, recalibrating the drainage sensors. 30 years as a city engineer, and you can't just turn that kind of instinct off. Willowbrook Estates is this perfectly manicured bowl of a neighborhood. My family's old house sitting right where runoff from the hills above likes to pool up. 2 years ago, after a mild storm left a lake in my backyard for a week, I decided enough was enough. 3 months of planning, hauling, and engineering. Stone from a local quarry, steel rods, proper drainage ports every 8 feet, just like I'd done for city infrastructure 100 times before. The barrier could have handled a 100-year flood, easy. I built it for my family, for the neighbors, for everyone. Victoria? She didn't see it that way. She showed up in a white blazer, hair perfect, expensive shoes digging into my muddy grass, and just started rattling off bylaws and sections, quoting the community covenants like they were scripture. Visual harmony, she said. Architectural review, she said. All I saw was a woman who never spent a night bailing out a basement, convinced that pretty lawns were more important than dry homes. I tried to explain, showed her the depression where water pooled, told her about the forecasted storms, tried to make her see sense. She didn't hear a word. Her nails were more interesting than my decades of experience. Then came the citation, official HOA letterhead, $10,000 fine for unauthorized construction, and a 14-day deadline to make the eyesore disappear. I held that paper and felt something heavier than just money. It was 30 years of my life, my father's voice in my ear, all dismissed in a couple of cold paragraphs. I tried once more to warn her. The Weather Service was predicting a rough season, storms we hadn't seen in years. But Victoria just smiled that frosty smile, told me I'd only been here 3 years since inheriting the place, and maybe I should trust the people who'd protected the community long before me. Then she walked back to her white Mercedes, heels clicking like a countdown. That night, I stared at the citation, weighing my options. Ethan, an old Weather Service buddy, texted, "Serious tropical activity on the horizon. Hope you're ready." So I got ready. I put together every chart, every rainfall record, every elevation map, stuff that would have wowed my old bosses at City Hall. I emailed it to the board, pointed out the obvious. Victoria? She didn't argue with the data. She just went on the attack. Within days, she'd started a Facebook group, Willowbrook Beautiful, posting photos of my wall shot from angles that made it look like the Great Wall of China, rallying neighbors with talk of community standards and scenic views. People I'd never met called me selfish, said I was ruining the neighborhood. Suddenly, I was the villain in a drama I didn't write. At the emergency HOA meeting, Victoria worked the crowd like a pro, talking about property values, shared investment, and the character of our neighborhood. I tried to challenge her, asked if she had a degree in hydraulic engineering, asked if she'd ever calculated flood risk. The room got quiet. She smiled, told everyone this wasn't about theoretical engineering, but about protecting what we all loved. The vote went her way, but for the first time, cracks started to show. Residents whispered about surveyors near the HOA building, about rumors of some wellness center going up behind the clubhouse. Victoria dodged questions, but I could tell she was rattled. Even so, pressure built. Anonymous notes in my mailbox, neighbors crossing the street to avoid me. I couldn't afford a legal battle or to be the community pariah forever. So, 2 days before the deadline, I documented everything, photos, video, engineering notes, and started dismantling the wall. The last stone was loaded up just as Ethan called again. There's a tropical system forming. Looks worse than anything we expected. 10 days later, Tropical Storm Jillian crashed in, 6 hours ahead of schedule, double the rainfall anyone had forecasted. I ran my own numbers. Those pipes under our streets? Supposed to handle a 50-year flood, but the blueprints didn't match what was actually there. Turns out, the construction company responsible was Langford Construction, run by Victoria's husband, Richard. No competitive bids, undersized pipes, and all the cost savings vanished into thin air. When I tried warning the neighborhood, Victoria doubled down. She sent out an official notice about unverified weather information, told residents not to spread panic. When I called folks myself, they told me to stop harassing them, or she'd get the lawyers involved. The deeper I dug, the uglier it got. Richard's company had a history. For other neighborhoods, all flooded within 5 years. Lawsuits settled quietly. Board minutes showing Victoria rubber-stamping contracts that lined her own family's pockets. As Jillian built strength, I got a message from an anonymous neighbor. You tried to warn everyone. Margaret Collins has documents you need. Come see her after the storm. Then the hurricane hit. Flooding, wind, chaos. From my home office, I watched live feeds from my security cameras. Water flowing exactly as I predicted, right where my barrier used to be. The first building to go? The HOA headquarters, built right on an old wetland, gone in minutes. I found a battered filing cabinet from Victoria's office jammed against my fence. Inside, correspondence with lawyers, bank statements showing big payments from a developer called Greenfield, all tied to consulting services. Turns out, Victoria and her daughter Emily were pushing through a massive resort project that would destroy half the forest above us. The flood barrier, my warnings, those were threats to their payday. Margaret showed up, soaked but determined, bringing more evidence, financial records, voice messages, a phone full of conversations about keeping the flood issue quiet until after the land was sold. Her own family had lost their home to a similar disaster years ago. This wasn't just paperwork to her, it was personal. When Victoria cut the Wi-Fi and tried to silence us during the hurricane, showed up at my door with security guards, threatening arrest for terrorism, I realized just how far she'd go to protect her interests. It was ugly, desperate, and very, very public. After the flood, I stitched together my drone footage, before, during, after, posted it online. Within hours, it exploded, engineers, planners, media calling nonstop. Margaret and I organized the Willowbrook Truth Coalition. Our story hit local news, then national, then state investigators started sniffing around. Victoria's PR machine tried to spin it, called me a rogue engineer out for revenge, but the evidence was too strong. Bank records, developer emails, whistleblowers like Jake Morrison stepping forward with stories about bribes and falsified reports in communities just like ours, up and down the coast. The emergency meeting at the middle school was a war zone. Victoria's lawyers blaming unprecedented weather, me showing time-stamped emails, audio recordings, financial trails, everything. Margaret read out statements from residents who'd lost everything. Victoria cracked, her supporters vanished, 2 board members flipped to save themselves, and the investigation went federal. State committees, criminal charges, corporate charters revoked, Greenfield and Langford Construction both shut down, assets seized, restitution ordered for everyone who lost their homes. Margaret took over as interim chair, wrote new bylaws, financial transparency, technical oversight, mandatory votes for big projects. I headed up the new infrastructure board, redesigned the flood barrier as a park, native plants, walking trails, educational signs, flood protection that looks good and works even better. Jake came back as director of compliance, and our story got taught in law schools, cited at conferences, even inspired state laws mandating technical review for HOA infrastructure everywhere. 1 year later, standing in Willowbrook Resilience Park, kids playing, families picnicking, old folks walking safe paths above the flood line. I finally understood what my father used to say. Sometimes, you have to fight for the right thing even when everyone around you thinks you're wrong. The plaque by the stream says, "Where science and community unite for safety, no one should remain silent when they recognize danger." I look at that and think, yeah, sometimes justice is ugly, sometimes it's loud, sometimes it's muddy and brutal, and you get called names you don't deserve. But sometimes, it's just a bunch of neighbors standing together, refusing to let greed and arrogance drown what really matters. So, you tell me, did I go too far, or was it about time someone stood up to these so-called guardians of community standards? Drop your thoughts below. Was I right to fight, or should I have just kept my head down and hoped the storm would pass? Let's hear your stories, your opinions, and maybe, just maybe, we'll figure out what real justice looks like when it finally rolls in.